Welcome to the Noonhour. I'm glad you're here. Grab some coffee or tea, sit back, and relax with me, Noonie. This is the Noonhour. I wanted to take a moment today to talk a little bit more about why I selected Francis Bacon's essays as a subject for some podcasts. He's a gentleman that was a writer and a statesman, as we saw last week, and he really had a lot of good thoughts about all sorts of different ways of living in the world and with other people that I think are still relevant today. He has thoughts on death, on gardening, on religion, on the self, of whether you should talk about your thoughts with other people, giving counsel to each other, all sorts of things that I think, again, are relevant to today, and that it's important to remember where we came from. As our society speeds up so quickly, it's easy to forget and to really think that things that are in the past or that are historical aren't relevant anymore. And I think that loses something for society. Particularly as we move more and more onto the internet, the older ways of becoming educated are getting lost in the shuffle. 100 years ago, Bacon was someone that an educated person would be expected to know and be familiar with, and today that's just not the case, particularly as we separate our learning into specializations and people focus on majors at the expense of learning basic skills and a common set of books to read and topics to discuss and subjects that each of us would be conversant in. That's really lost today, particularly as we move away from a well-rounded humanities education. So I really think that looking at authors like Bacon and some of the other people, particularly Montaigne, who is an essayist, are very important today, and that they can really help us understand the world around us, even though things have changed so much and the internet and other kinds of technology are so prevalent. One of the other things that I think happens is that we speed up so quickly and we lose touch with some of the slower ways that people lived maybe even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We have phones that are with us all the time. We expect to be accessible 24/7. Some of us have jobs that give us smartphones and computers and expect us to respond to emails at 10 o'clock at night or on the weekends. And those are things that really we need to get better about framing for ourselves so that we can achieve work-life balance, but also so that we can become more effective. And looking at the way that people handled things 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in the case of Francis Bacon, 400 or 500 years ago, I think is very relevant to now. Even though it might not be as speedy as, say, something on television or something that we'd see on the internet in a video, he offers us a way of thinking about the inputs coming into our space and how we want to respond to them in a way that really keeps us balanced and grounded, and that's valuable to us. This next essay is called Of Death, and is a way that he talks about people dying and our own mortality that I think is relevant to probably every one of us. Men fear death as children fear to go into the dark. And as that natural fear in children is increased with tales, so is the other. Certainly the contemplation of death, as the wages of sin and passage to another world, is holy and religious, but the fear of it, as a tribute due unto nature, is weak. Yet in religious meditations there is sometimes mixture of vanity and of superstition. You shall read in some of the friars' books of mortification that a man should think with himself what the pain is if he have but his fingers' end pressed or tortured, and thereby imagine what the pains of death are, when the whole body is corrupted and dissolved, when many times death passeth with less pain than the torture of a limb. For the most vital parts are not the quickest of sense. And by him that spake only as a philosopher and natural man, it was well said, Pompa mortis magisteret, quam mors ipsa. It is the accompaniments of death that are frightful rather than the death itself. Seneca. Groans and convulsions, and a discolored face, and friends weeping, and mourning garments, and obsequies, and the like, show death terrible. It is worthy the observing that there is no passion in the mind of man so weak, but it conquers and masters the fear of death, and therefore death is no such a terrible enemy when a man hath so many attendants about him that can win the combat of him. Revenge triumphs over death, love slights it, honor aspireth to it, grief flieth to it, fear reoccupateth it. Nay, we read, after Otho the emperor had slain himself, pity, which is the tenderest of affections, provoked many to die out of a mere compassion to their sovereign, and as the truest sort of followers. Nay, Seneca adds nisus and satiety. Cogita quam diu edem feceris, mori vela non tatum fortis aut miser, sed etiam fastidiosis potest. Think how long thou hast done the same thing. Not only a valiant man or a miserable man, but also a fastidious man is able to wish for death. A man would die, though he were neither valiant nor miserable, only upon a weariness to do the same thing so oft over and over. It is no less worthy to observe how little alteration in good spirits the approaches of death make, for they appear to be the same men till the last instant. Augustus Caesar died in a compliment. Farewell, Livia, and forget not the days of our marriage. Tiberius in dissimulation, as Tacitus saith of him, his powers of body were gone, but his powers of dissimulation still remained. Vespasian in a jest sitting upon a stool, as I think I am becoming a god. Galba with a sentence, strike, if it be for the good of Rome, holding forth his neck. Septimius Severus in dispatch, be at hand, if there is anything more for me to do, and the like. Certainly the Stoics bestowed too much cost upon death, and by their great preparations made it appear more fearful. Better said he who accounts the close of life as one of the benefits of nature, Juvenal. It is as natural to die as to be born, and to a little infant perhaps the one is as painful as the other. He that dies in an earnest pursuit is like one that is wounded in hot blood, who for the time scarce feels the hurt. And therefore a mind fixed and bent upon somewhat that is good doth avert the dolours of death. But above all, believe it, the sweetest canticle is, now lettest thou depart, when a man hath obtained worthy ends and expectations. Death has this also, that it opens the gate to good fame and extinguishes envy. The same man that was envied while he lived shall be loved when he is gone. That ends this podcast of the Noonhour. For more information, please visit me on the web at acatherinenoon.com and stay tuned for the next Noonhour.